Hello, everyone. This is Ryan and Derek from Badgerland Birding, and today we are joined by our friend Matthew, the Minnesota birder, because a very interesting species just showed up and is apparently nesting in Minnesota, the Abert's towhee. So, Matthew, we wanted to bring you on and kind of see what your experience was hearing about these birds and then actually going to see them and just kind of what the birding community in Minnesota is doing right now with these two rare visitors.
Yeah, so it's great to be on the show once again. So for the Averts, the first I heard, I was actually out of the state. I was in Medora, North Dakota, and I got a message from some friends on a little Facebook group that we're in, and they were like, "Yo, Abert's Towhees just showed up," and I kind of had to push it down for a little bit because I was like, I want to see these birds, but I'm not in the state right now. Like I'm gonna have to wait a couple days, but I figured once I got back and I had a little bit of time, I'd run up there and go get them. And then at this point, I didn't even realize when I first heard that it was a pair. And then I read into it and I was like, oh, there's a pair. How do I feel about that? And that kind of started the theories and things. Like at first, I think it was just like, oh, there's an Abert's towhee. And then they were like, oh, it's a pair. And one's got nesting material. And things got a little bit more fishy after that.
So did that give you a little bit more time? You're like, oh, they're nesting. I can go see it later. Or were you still, I need to go see it as quick as possible?
Little bit of both. I mean, I've been talking to some friends about going up there because I went with a birder friend of mine, and they were like, oh, they're nesting, we've got time. And I was like, this is a bird on my needs alert, and it's the only one. And there's like 30 reports. I'm gonna go see this thing as soon as I can. So so there's gonna be time. It'll probably stick there for a while. That's kind of the thought, unless somebody takes it in or it has some sort of environmental cause of death or somehow taken away. But yeah, so I figured I would have time, but I have a little bit of free time on the day after I got back, so I just figured I'd run up there, get them, and come back home.
So you brought up that the fact that they're nesting is a little bit on the fishy side. And I remember you were saying right away that people are questioning where the origins of these birds came from because the towhees are a species that only really live in Arizona. And so they're not really migratory. So it's not expected that they would meander this far north. So what are the hypotheses right now about how they actually got there? Do people think they are in fact wild and somehow just got off course?
Right. So, I mean, one big thing about Aberts, like you said, they are almost Arizona exclusive. They can be found in like 100-ish miles from the border. There's one record from El Paso that was obviously probably a natural vagrant because that's not too far. But most of the records have always been centered around Arizona. So, and they're a sedentary bird, so they don't migrate. They're just like any permanent resident bird. They're happy in their habitat. They have no cause to migrate, and birds that don't migrate are much less likely to show up as natural vagrants, as a general rule. Um, One of the main theories that I was hearing a lot about at first was a truck assist, perhaps, truck or train. So somehow these birds, the thought was they were trying to build a nest in the lower, kind of less checked areas of a truck or a train, and they just kind of slipped in there. And then a train or a truck came up to Minnesota, which they do all the time. There's always people driving the interstates and stuff, people with truck jobs and just trains crisscrossing the US all the time. So that was the main theory. But then some new news that came in on Facebook was that kind of like a who knows who, like kind of like one of those stories. But I guess there's somebody who knows somebody who captures Arizona birds and brings them to his house and tries to raise them.
That
That
does sound
Interesting.
sketchy.
Yeah.
This is a new thing that just came out a couple days ago, and some people are just kind of casting it off as nonsense. But it was a post on our Facebook group. Somebody knows a guy in Blackberry, Minnesota, which is just like I don't know. It's a couple towns east of Grand Rapids, and I guess there was a Gamble's quail in somebody's yard last winter in the same area. So that is kind of like another thing to think about. That's another bird that would never show up, and that's a bird that's probably even less of a flyer, being a game bird. So
Yeah, that's interesting. The thing about the truck is if they were building a nest there, wouldn't they just continue to keep that nest on the truck and then just go wherever the truck was?
I know that's my thought as well. Like it seems very improbable. Like it almost seemed like one of those scenarios that they almost had to be placed there. Like somebody would have had to like physically grab the Towhees and put them in this area, which is kind of what the thought is with this supposed guy that somebody who knows him, and they don't know if he still does it, and they don't know the extent of what he does, but he might have something to do with bringing Arizona birds back to Minnesota, or to Minnesota, I should say, not back, but to Minnesota. And I have no idea why. People have strange hobbies sometimes.
Yeah, that's we'll definitely have to keep following that as the story kind of evolves.
I was gonna say, I feel like we need to get that guy on and just ask him what he's all about.
Well, he's a friend of he's a mystery guy. We don't even know who he is.
I mean, I don't even know that that's probably not even legal to just like capture birds in Arizona. That's why he's a mystery guy.
So what was it like going to see the birds then? Did they look healthy and everything?
Yeah, to me they looked healthy. I mean, location wise, this is like a little green space in Grand Rapids with some like spruces and bushes around it. It's a sledding hill, and it's just kind of like a little park. So I walked over there. We actually tried for a little bit, and we only heard the call notes a couple times, so we left and then just poked around Grand Rapids a little bit. And then I got a text that they were back and giving good looks, so we went back there, and they were in the same area that we heard them calling. But we obviously didn't want to play any calls because we didn't want to agitate them in any way. So we just went back, and then they were just there. We got a couple looks. They were still hopping around in the brush, but there was just the whole park is bisected by yards, and we were mostly watching it on the edge of somebody's yard, just hopping around low behind a shed and just over a few things. It landed on their deck a couple times and started moving around. We did see the female carrying a stick, and we did see the male. We heard him sing a couple times. It was pretty quiet, but it was pretty cool. But yeah, they were just.
Do you think they'll be successful nesting?
That's a good question, because I don't think they've ever tried in Minnesota before.
I would think not. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that they would have ever tried. This is definitely one of those scientific anomalies. Like, it's kind of like an experiment at this point. Like, what will happen and how will we watch it happen? I think they could, because they've been there since May 25th, and I didn't know about them until like a few days ago. So the fact that they've been there that long and doing fine and trying to build a nest, I'd like to think maybe that they will, but a new population of Abert's Towhees in Minnesota might not be the best idea.
Well, yeah, when winter comes around, if they don't have like a migratory response, really,
no,
they might just kind of get toasted.
Either. I mean, most birds in general, they don't know where they are once they're that far out. But there isn't too much thought as to them being natural vagrants at this time. A few people have mentioned that other sedentary Southwestern birds have shown up in the upper Midwest this time of year. But it's not a likely enough occurrence for this bird for us to know anything. And given a pair, I don't think that's ever happened before.
Mm-hmm.
I know like singly, desert birds have shown up in the upper Midwest. I've seen desert birds in the upper Midwest, like the black-throated sparrow a few weeks ago. That was a natural vagrant, and that was.
Or was it that same guy who also brought up black-throated sparrows?
It was on the other side of the state, so I hope not.
It is kind of interesting, though, that you guys did have the black-throated sparrow as well. And then recently, I mean, not really recently, but back when migration was in full swing, we had a lot of birds from the Southwest, too. So we had like the ash-throated flycatcher showed up and the scissor-tailed flycatcher showed up. So it does seem like there was a good push from the winds that came up that way, too. But like you mentioned, it is very odd that there's two. You could see maybe one, like if there's one up there somewhere, like, okay, got off course, but two is a little bit strange.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know how like well kept the pairs really are. Like, I don't know how nurturing the male is in this scenario. So it just seems very odd that there's two of these birds in Minnesota. And it's really just one of those things that ends up being a mystery, and a really weird one at that. Like I don't know too many stories like this.
Yeah, it'll be definitely interesting to follow it as it develops and to see if they're successful or not, and if we learn anything more about their origins. I'm assuming this is the first state record then, huh?
It is the first state record, yep.
Are people counting it officially, or are they holding off on that?
Actually, most people are counting it on Ebert, and like, it's not even just the number, but some of the people I've seen counting it on Ebert are very like good birders. Like, these are some of the top birders in the state who've seen a lot of things. So I decided to count it on Ebert. The records committee for Minnesota is going to be a little bit more harder to get these birds passed, but currently they're not being confirmed on eBird, but there's a little over 50 eBird reports right now in the rare bird alert, but they're all unconfirmed at this point.
Kind of reminds me of our common shell duck we have that just hangs out at a park.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like people eBird it all the time, but no one actually confirms it, because it's like, well, I guess I'll just eBird it since it's there, but probably not wild.
Mm-hmm.
Well, awesome. That's an incredible event. And thanks so much, Matthew, for joining us to tell us more about it. And I'm excited to see how this all pans out in the future.
Yeah, you'll have to keep us posted and see if that mystery character ever comes forward and says that he's been breeding Towhees at his property.
Yeah, I'll let you guys know. We all want to know that at this point. It makes the difference for if this bird's countable or not. So everyone's going to do the best they can to get more information. So.
Well, awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Matthew, and have a great rest of your night.
Thanks for having me, guys.